How y'all doing today? I'm Rob. I'm up here at Home Hardware. We are here today in our new Concord location with Chester, who is happens to be this location's in-store deck stain expert. Chester, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
We're going to go over a few things about some deck stains. We're going to differentiate a little bit between your semi-transparents, solid colors, elastomerics, oil-based, water-based, and kind of run the gamut on what you can do to choose the proper deck stain for you. We are here with our Defy product as front and center presentation, and that is because recently our company has been very proud to announce that we have partnered up with Defy, Chet, who is a very like-minded company as Home Hardware, in the fact that they are family-owned. They are relatively locally based, more so to one of our other locations on the other side of the state. They're actually out of Richmond, Indiana, which is pretty close to our Canham location. But they're just, it's very exciting for a company like ours, who's a small family-owned company, to be able to partner up with a very similar company as ours, so we can all try to grow together. So we're pretty proud, and not to mention the fact, Chester, that the Defy product is at the pinnacle of deck stains right now. In fact, if you're familiar with Gary Sullivan, whenever he gets on his radio show and talks home improvement deck stains, he speaks about Defy. Just speaks to the quality of that product. So we're pretty happy to have that on board, and we're going to tell you a lot of stuff about Defy, but we're also going to help you understand the differences in a lot of these types of stains.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Chester, before we get into you giving us your knowledge as far as differentiating between oil-based and water-based, we're going to break the categories out as your three main topics of conversation of deck stains: semi-transparents, solid color deck stains, and elastomerics. First off, when you're talking about semi-transparent stains, you're talking very clearly about stains that when you apply them to your deck, they show off the grain of the wood. They show that beauty off. Some of your other stains kind of hide that stuff. So yes, you do get to purchase your stain with a tint color to it, which will alter the color of the deck to how you want it to present, but it's not going to hide how beautiful that wood is. So that's essentially what your semi-transparents are going to be. When you get into your solid color deck stains, you're getting more into a paint style stain that's going to hide a little bit more of the wood grain, but it's going to be essentially, Chester, tintable to whatever color you want. And as you brought up to me this morning before we started getting into this, we are right next to the color swatch. So I'm actually going to go over here and snatch one up. And Chester, when you talk about your solid color deck stains, you can essentially pick any one of these and we can color it.
Any color in our fan deck we can make in the solid color stains, which is pretty unique. There's a lot of variations in colors over there.
Absolutely. And I mean, I might have grabbed the wrong one. I'm not sure if anyone wants to tint their deck to this beautiful green color, but hey, you know what? I'm sure someone out there might want to.
They very well might.
I'm not here to judge.
Yeah.
So your solid color deck stains essentially turn your deck to the color you want and provide more of a hiding of an older deck wood, maybe that's not as beautiful as it once was. When you get into your elastomerics, you're essentially talking about a coating, a hard shell coating, almost like a plastic. Those are more for decks that are really on their last legs. They've been around for a while. The stains are not really protecting the wood the way they used to. You're getting some split in the woods and stuff. Those just put a casing around it. Once you decide to go into an elastomeric, you're kind of married to elastomerics for the remainder of the life of that deck. It's also important to remember when you are choosing some semi-transparents, when you're choosing that brand, some of those clear semi-transparents, which essentially it's a transparent stain at that point. It's just to protect them. Make sure when you're looking at those products, you're asking the question of whether or not they are perfectly clear. I know for a fact, Chester, if you pour the Defy clear semi-transparent stain into a glass, it's like looking through a glass of water.
Yes, it is.
A lot of your other clears from other brands, you actually have to add stuff to that to clear it up, to clarify it. Otherwise, you have a little bit of milky color to it. So make sure you're paying very close attention to that when you're choosing your clears. Okay, Chet, so let's get into some differences in the oil-based and water-based. Now that we've separated the three main categories out. Chet, I know that water-based and oil-based have different time frames and different climate restrictions as far as when you can or cannot apply them as far as your windows. What can you tell us about those?
Well, absolutely, Rob. The oil-based stains need at least a 3-day dry time before you can reset your furniture and the things on your deck, as well as getting out and walking on it. And that also depends on the humidity level at the time. So it takes a lot longer to dry.
So you're talking about you need a 3-day window of no rain
in
order to apply an oil base.
Right.
What about a water base?
Water-based, you can apply that. If it rains in the morning, you can apply it that same very afternoon or even a few hours later in the morning. Simply, as long as the deck is dry to the touch, you can apply your stain.
That's pretty awesome. That's a huge difference.
That's a huge difference, not having to take 2, maybe sometimes 3 days just to stain your deck and then hope you don't get rain.
That's nuts, and that kind of drives into the discussion of the months that are best for staining your deck. Growing up, my father and I always stained in August because that month is typically your longest stretches of no rain, when in fact August is probably the worst month to do it because of your deck temperatures. Chet, you got any keys or tips on how you can identify whether or not your deck can be stained temperature-wise?
Temperature-wise, as long as you can step on your deck in your bare feet and tolerate it, you're okay. And it's a typical temperature of about 85 degrees. Now you must remember the sunlight pounding on your deck raises the temperature of that deck just like any other surface. So you want to be able to walk on it and make sure it's not too hot, because that causes the stain to dry too quickly and it doesn't give you as much operating time to apply the stain.
So I want to get a pedi before I go out there on my feet, because I kind of got stone feet as it is, and I might have a higher tolerance to deck temperatures than if I haven't got a pretty foot.
Yeah. Okay.
No one wants to hear about my pretty feet right now, do they, Chet?
No, they don't.
Let's get back into business a little bit here, man. So Chet, I know that there are a lot of preparation steps that you have to take when you're staining a deck. Some more on oil-based, some less on water-based. What can you tell us about what has to be done to that deck based on the style of product that you're using?
Well, with the oil-based stains, you need to actually strip all the oil-based stains off of the deck before you reapply. Even if you're reapplying with another oil base or a water base, you have to strip that all the way off. Otherwise, the adhesion of the new stain won't take, because there's still stain involved into the deck. You can restain up to 5 times with a water-based stain. So when you see your deck stain, and I don't like to use the word failing, but if it's dulling and not looking as bright and as nice as you'd like it to, you can reapply up to 5 times, which can be on an annual basis or on a 3-year basis, depending on the weather conditions that you're dealing with. So
hold on, Chad, not to interrupt you, man, but does that mean we could basically, out of a water base like the 5, we could potentially get 20 years out of the original coat?
Oh, absolutely.
Maintenance coats?
Oh, absolutely. And it does not need to be stripped back off when you're using a water base. All you have to do is clean it. You can use a pressure washer, which we can rent you, or you can use just a soft bristle brush and some Dawn dish detergent to clean that deck. Any household detergent will do.
Are you getting paid by Dawn dish soap right now?
No, I'm not, but I'm looking for the residuals.
Yeah. We'll see if that pocket fills up throughout this discussion, Chester.
Okay. Before your maintenance coat, you need to clean the deck, and then you can just reapply the water-based maintenance coat, which, as with an oil base, you'd have to strip all that oil base back off, which takes a lot of time. So remember, your labor's just as important as how the deck stain actually holds up.
Right, and Chester, when we get into those, those steps and the preparation, every deck stain that you choose, or that they choose for more to the point, has an application date and a failure date, because every deck stain will eventually fail.
Oh, absolutely.
The steps that you take in preparation to staining that deck with its original coat separate those two dates much more far apart than if they were to shortcut themselves. I mean, let's talk about it. If you cut a step out, you're shortcutting yourself. Absolutely. And you're shortcutting the longevity of that deck. You want to do as many things as you can to keep those things as far apart, because no one wants to go out there every year and restain those decks, or every 3 years. You want to be able to get as much time between those two as possible. Okay, Chester, so we're looking at selecting our stains, obviously, still. What are some of the things? I know there's a lot of information on the back of your cans as far as guarantees and all this other stuff. Is there any advice you can give us on what kind of products we're choosing and how we can identify which ones we're looking for?
Right. Well, most of your oil-based stains on the market will actually ask you to coat all 4 sides of the wood. And I'm not quite sure how that's possible when your deck flooring is all the way down. You're going to crawl under the deck and stain under there.
Hey, Chet, I don't think this guy can crawl underneath of any deck.
There you go.
I just don't think I can
There you
fit.
go.
I mean, and really, realistically, who does that?
Right.
You know, the majority of your weather beating comes from the top. Yes, you do get some from the bottom, but the Defy product that I know for a fact does not have that restriction on its product guarantee. So make sure that you're looking at that very closely when you're choosing your deck stain. And I'm not saying that these companies use that as the way to get out of guaranteeing their product.
Sure.
But I think a lot of companies use that to get out of guaranteeing their product.
I think it might happen as well. I think it might happen as well.
So, let's slide into a little bit of deck preparation, Chester. I know that you guys are a rental store here at the new Concord location. I know that you rent sanders. What is probably the most common question you get on sanders?
Can I sand my deck with this? And the answer to that question is absolutely not. One of the drawbacks of sanding your deck as opposed to using the chemical applications that we advertise and sell is that what it does is it burnishes the deck, which basically means you're putting the mill glaze back on the deck, which puts it, basically it takes whatever's on that deck and grinds it down into the grain, not allowing your stain to penetrate through. So you've got to remove all that, and the best way to do that is to raise the grain of your wood by using our chemical processing. Sanding is also a lot more labor intensive, and basically it's hard on the sanding equipment as well.
Yeah, because, I mean, your deck's got, everybody knows, and they've stepped on them.
Oh, yeah.
Those little nail heads or little screw heads that
absolutely.
back themselves up out. You run a sander across that, you just bought a sand. And let's touch on new out-of-factory decks real quick, Chester, while we're on that topic. It's very important for you to remember that if you do put up a brand new deck with new treated wood, Chester, how long do they have to wait before they can actually stain that?
You should wait for 2 full seasons to allow that deck to cure, which allows all the moisture content and the preservatives that they place in the wood to evaporate out.
Okay, Chester. So we've chosen our stain, you know, and we're getting ready to go through the process of prepping and staining the deck. I know you've got some pretty key points of things you should have. You can do it without them, but it makes your job a lot harder. You've got to kind of narrow down to 5 things that they should all have when they're going to do their decks. What are we talking about? What are we looking for, Chester?
Well, one of the first things you're going to need is a 5-gallon bucket. The 5-gallon bucket is so you can mix all your solutions in the 5-gallon bucket. And
this is a crimson and gray Orm hardware bucket.
Yes, it is.
Will you find any maize and blue?
No, not anywhere in any of the Orm hardware locations will you find maize and blue buckets.
Did you hear that, Josh? Okay, I just wanted to make a point of that. We had a manager at another location who wanted maize and blue buckets.
No.
Yes.
No.
So, yes, Chester, you guys got plenty of these buckets, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Super.
There's always plenty of buckets on hand.
Super. What's the second thing we need on our list?
Well, we're going to need a pump sprayer.
Like this guy right here?
Pump sprayer, just like any other that we sell here at the store. There are many variations. You can get an extremely expensive one or an inexpensive one. Either one will work just fine. The purpose of the pump sprayer is for easier application of all these cleaning products and brighteners. One thing you want to keep in mind, you need to clean that pump sprayer thoroughly after use in order to not have any of these chemical residues stuck in the machine so that it'll clog up all the rubbers and all the valves and everything that are in there. And then it's perfectly usable for any other application you might have around the home.
Right, so even if they go with a cheap pump sprayer, they can still use that again as long as they don't just leave that chemical
Absolutely.
sitting in there until the next time they need a pump sprayer, which I've never done that.
No, I don't think I've never used weed killer in place of fertilizer.
Never done it. Okay, number 3, Chet, what are we looking for?
Well, the number 3 thing that we're going to need is a strainer.
Like this guy right here?
Absolutely. It's a 5-gallon bucket strainer, and what you'll do with that is after you make up your chemical mixtures and pour them into your pump sprayer, you're going to want to strain that as you're pouring it into your pump sprayer so that you don't pick up any particulates that may have fallen into your bucket. And if it doesn't dissolve 110%, you don't get any of that residue left that you're going to apply on your deck.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you that may have heard the dog barking in the background, Duke is very unhappy that he's not giving this presentation because he feels he has more knowledge than you do on the deck stain.
Absolutely.
I don't buy into it. I think he just wants the camera time.
Yeah.
So that's why he's screaming on the other side of that camera right there.
The last promotion I think he did was roll that bean footage.
Okay, so that's our third thing. What's number 4, Chet?
Well, you're going to need a pressure washer on your number 4 thing, and we sell those as well as we rent them here at Orm Hardware. If you don't have that available, you can use a power jet nozzle, which are available on most of our locations.
So, I mean, obviously, the preferred method, Chester, is going to be the pressure washer.
Absolutely.
This
Absolutely.
can be utilized. It's just going to take you a lot longer. And this little Big Shot nozzle is something that we actually stock at all the oil hardware stores. And just a little side note, this is a product that's assembled by disabled American veterans. If you haven't noticed a theme, what's going on our table right here, Chester? American product, American product.
Absolutely.
You know, we do the best we can in today's marketplace to try to provide as many American-made products as possible. Good idea for you to pick up, even if you don't need it for this process. These are actually pretty good nozzles that get some good pressure.
Sure. Help power wash your house, clean your gutters.
All right, Chester. Those are 4 things. The fifth thing that we're going to need is what?
A long-handled applicator brush. These are soft bristled brushes, much like you'd find in your car wash that you wash your car with in order not to scratch.
That soft, Chet? Do we want?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot where I was.
Yeah. Was that very soothing?
Yes, it was.
I've been doing this the wrong way. I need somebody to do it to my head.
That's probably true.
That's a pretty soft bruch.
Right.
A couple things we accomplished with that. Number one, and most important, is it soaks a lot of that stain up in there, so it's almost like using a mop, but you have a brush application. And you can use a mop, from what I understand, but you will actually use a lot more stain.
Absolutely.
Because it's not going to be as controllable as this type of an application.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, Chet, so those are our 5 things. So I think at this point we're ready to start prepping our deck, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, let's talk about prepping. Okay, Chester, we are ready to start our steps, and there's 3 basic steps that you were telling me that we needed to make sure that we do. What are those 3 steps?
Well, your first step's going to be you need to clean your deck, then you need to brighten your deck, and then you're ready to stain your deck.
Okay, seems pretty simple to me. Let's just dive right into the cleaning of the deck. This is the cleaner right here that you were showing me before. Before we even talk about how this gets mixed or what we do, it seems like it's a powder, and we'll talk about that in a second. As far as this cleaner is concerned, what if I have plants and vegetation under my deck?
It's perfectly safe for most plants and vegetation. It's basically just a light solution, and it's a oxygenated bleach, much like you'd find in OxyClean. And it does a really good job of removing any of the residuals that are on your deck as far as stain goes. Bird droppings, tree sap, all the things that could penetrate and soak into your wood to stop the stain into yours.
How do we go about getting this on the deck when we're ready to apply it? Do we just dump this on the deck and scrub it in, or what do we do?
No, not at all. You need to apply it into a full bucket of 5 gallons warm water, and then add the granules and stir it until they dissolve. The reason you want to do that is if you put this in first and then add your water, you're going to get a lot of foaming, and you're not going to get the full 5 gallons that you're going to want in order to process your job. You're going to want to put it through the strainer that we spoke about earlier, and you're going to apply it with either your pump sprayer or a mop, or if you use a mop, you're going to use a lot more solution than what's really necessary. You want to spray this onto a pre-wetted deck, let it set for about 20 minutes, and then power wash it off.
Probably important to know that we don't want this to fully dry.
No, we don't want it to fully dry because it'll leave a slight haze behind if you allow it to fully dry. That's very difficult to get off.
Yeah, and pressure wash it off, or you could use that little Big Shot nozzle. Obviously, it's going to go a lot quicker with pressure washing it off.
Absolutely.
One thing that I have noticed, Chester, and you're going to probably say it a few more times, this being a water-based stain, it almost seems like you want the deck to stay wet through most of the cleaning process.
Through most of the process, yes,
yeah,
sir.
And even when you get into the staining, obviously you don't want to stain a wet deck under any circumstances, but when you're reapplying a second coat, you're going to talk about that in a minute, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But this product, you want to keep that moisture on the deck. It's going to help you with your process.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to take a little bit of a left turn real quick, Chester, because there are some decks that have been applied with oil-based or solid color deck stains that you need to get all the way back down to the wood. How do we do that?
You'll use a stripper. DeVry's got an excellent stripper product.
This it right here?
This is it right here.
Okay, I'll hold that up for you.
All right, thank you. With this stripper, it's ready to use. You pour it straight into your pump sprayer, apply it to the deck. Do not allow it to dry. Keep that moist. I believe it has to be on there for 15 to 20 minutes.
Yes.
And 15 to 20 minutes, you can hose that off, and that should strip off all of the residues left from other deck stains and tree sap and the various things that get into your deck.
Okay, and one point of note, this is a stripper. This is for more strenuous applications of getting your deck down to the wood. This is not vegetation safe.
No.
So you need to make sure you protect your vegetation that's underneath of your deck when you're utilizing this. And it's also recommended, again, you can use the little big shot nozzle if you really want to, or one of those like products, but you're really going to be unhappy if you strip down a deck without a pressure washer.
Absolutely.
Because this step here takes a lot more aggression than does your cleaning or brightening steps.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's the stripping stage. Let's talk about brightening. Okay, Chet, so at this point, you've cleaned and or stripped your deck. You're looking at that deck and you are thinking, man, that is exactly how that deck looked when I got it. I've never seen it look that good. I have no reason to brighten this wood. I'm just going to go ahead and start staining. Tell us why we don't want to skip that step, Chester.
No, you don't want to skip the brightening step, because when you apply the brightener actually cleans off all the cleaners and the strippers, as well as removing any particulates that may be still buried into the wood, and it'll bring back the natural wood tone and the natural wood grain, so that you're going to see that, especially with a transparent stain.
Yeah, and I actually had this conversation with Chris over at the Holmes County location, and his word was porosity.
Porosity. The porosity of the wood.
There's a little shout out to Chris right there.
All right.
So yeah, I mean, this is what the brightening does. It opens up the porosity and preparation for getting that stain in there, so it's gonna take to that wood correctly. And that original milled color, folks, is extremely important, because when you come into the store and you choose one of these semi-transparent stains based on these color swatches, if you don't get it back to that original milled form, the likelihood that it's going to look exactly as you think it's going to it minimizes.
Sure.
Because it's not going to. No one can be sure how much sun or shade or what the conditions of your deck have ever been. You need to brighten it, because you need to get that as close to that original milled color as possible, so these stain colors look correctly for you.
Absolutely.
And of course, we are talking very specifically about the semi-transparents as far as the stain look color. The solid colors are going to be a little more paint-like, and you should get relatively close, but you still don't want to skip that brightening step.
No, you do not.
Because you want that wood to look as good as you can before you start taking this. And again, we talked about the application date and the failure date.
Absolutely.
The brightening step is a very important step in the preparation to keep those two dates as far as possible.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the brightener, that's this one right here, Chester.
Yep.
Tell us how we go about mixing this, if we do need to mix it, or what we need to worry about.
Yeah, this is a concentrate, so you're going to need to put 4 gallons of warm water in your bucket. You're going to pour this in and stir it. And then you're going to strain it through the strainer back into your pump sprayer and apply with a pump sprayer. And you need to keep it wet at all times. You don't want to allow that to dry on your deck, as we've repeated on all these steps, that you need your deck to stay wet and moist, so that the product doesn't glaze over and change the color of the stain when it's applied.
Okay, and this stays on for what, 5-10 minutes?
5-10 minutes is plenty suffice for that, because all it's designed to do is erase the grain of the wood. Once it soaks in and raises the grain of the wood, it'll accept the stain in a much better fashion.
And this is the one step, Chester, that you don't actually have to have a pressure washer for.
No.
The garden hose, even a regular garden hose, you don't even need a pressurized nozzle
No,
for that.
just rinse it off.
Rinsing it off.
Right.
Can I pressure wash it off if I want to?
If you want to. If
I
you're
really
in
like
love
pressure
if you're in
washing
love
stuff.
with your pressure washer.
I really like pressure washing
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely.
Okay, awesome. I mean, I've rented it from you. I'm going to use it as much as I can.
Well, you might as well.
Okay. All right. So that's out of the way. We are now going to talk about staining. We're ready to stain, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's talk staining. So, okay, Chet. So our cleaning is done. Our prepping is done. We are ready to start staining. But before you get into putting that stain on, I know there are differences in the dry times based on oil or water-based stains. Give us some tips.
Well, for an oil-based stain, you're going to need to have that deck bone dry in order to absorb the oil and for the oil-based stain to work. So you're going to have to wait a significant amount of time after following all these processes for it to dry. You don't want to actually wait till the next day, so you're going to have this process try to be done in one full day. That dry time is a time eater.
What about water-based?
Well, with the water-based stain, you can apply as soon as it's dry to the touch. If it looks dry and feels dry, you can apply. It doesn't have to be 100% bone dry, but you don't want standing water on the deck, obviously, because it won't mix well. But as long as that deck is dry to the touch, you can apply your stain.
So, and there we go with what we talked about at the very beginning of this discussion, Chester. It can rain in the morning because your prep steps, the deck needs to be wet for anyway.
Right.
So it can rain in the morning and you can start your prep, and the sun of the afternoon hits and it dries that deck out to the touch.
Absolutely.
And visibly dry, and you can start staining.
Same
you
day.
can do this whole process in one day.
In one day.
With a water base. Oil base, 3 days.
3 days.
Yep, you got to have 3 days.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about the staining process, Chester. Which surfaces do we want to start with first?
You want to stain your vertical surfaces first, being your handrails and your spindles on your handrails. This being that you don't want the stain to drip onto the deck and then dry there, and then when you come back to reapply the stain on the deck, you've got a problem of lapping, is what it's called, and that's where there's little droplets that came off. So you also want to place cardboard or sheets, plastic drop cloth, whatever might be necessary underneath those vertical surfaces so that you don't get an overlap onto the bottom of the deck.
Okay, and when we're talking about second coats, Chester, let's talk about the water base specifically. How long do you have to wait before that second coat? How quickly do you want it to go on?
10 to 15 minutes is a suffice enough time, and the main thing is you also do not want it to dry completely, because the first coat will soak in, dry completely, and it's going to do its job. It's going to start working the minute it's dry, and it won't allow you to get the second coat of your stain to adhere to the wood. So you need to keep the surface moist at all times, so it's best to do smaller sections at a time so that it doesn't dry on you in between coats.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's good information right there. I wish I had some of that information back when I was younger, Chester.
No, me too.
I made a lot of mistakes on that. I had a lot of gumming, I had a lot of puddling,
Right.
and it was all because I thought it was best to let that whole dang thing dry and then go back out and throw another coat on there.
Right.
That's the worst thing to
No,
do.
second coat will not adhere if the first coat's dry already.
Okay, so how much stain are we talking about as far as applying to that, Chester? What's the amount of stain we want to get out of that wood?
You don't want to oversaturate it. More is not necessarily better. You just want it to soak in and allow it to do its job. Don't allow it to dry before the second coat, and then apply a second coat, which your second coat's going to take less stain than the first coat because it's already begun its staining process.
Right, so you're only looking to put on as much as the wood will absorb.
As much as the wood will absorb.
All right, and we obviously have our car wash brush. Let's talk about our brushes real quick. If you're doing your brush surfaces, which will be your verticals, you don't really need to use a brush for the a hand brush for the horizontal surfaces. When you're using a brush, an oil-based brush, let's just say, is it okay to use one of those with a water-based stain? Or
Not actually. You want to use a latex paintbrush or just a fine bristled paintbrush to apply your handrails and your spindles. The oil-based brushes don't actually adhere to the water-based product as well, and you don't get as good a coverage.
Okay, so we're done with our verticals, Chester. We are ready to start working on our horizontal surfaces. I do want to point out very quickly that these soft brushes that we were talking about do fit directly down in there. So it's actually beneficial. You can see how that goes.
Right.
It's beneficial to, once you're done and you're ready to start staining, dump that stain in that 5-gallon bucket, man.
Absolutely.
That's what you got it for. Get your use out of your products, and you can just dip this guy right down in there and you can start moving along.
Right.
How many boards at a time, Chester, do they think you should do, and where should you start on
You
those?
should really only do 4 to 5 boards at a time, therefore it doesn't dry before you get to the next step. So you're going to do 4 to 5 boards, maybe in a 6 or 7 foot pattern in length, and so that you can reach it with the handle off of the brush, and then you give it a few minutes and then reapply the second coat before it dries. You want to stop at the edge of a board so that you don't get a lapping problem. So you're going to start your next 4 or 5 boards at the edge of the board. So you don't want to go halfway through a board and let it dry. You want to stop at the edge so that your next set starts over again as you're crossing the deck.
Guilty. Do the whole board. Do the whole board. If you do your deck in half, you'll see that color lap,
Yes,
man. I'm
you
telling you,
Yeah.
do that whole board. It's very important. Okay, so Chester, I think that's pretty much the whole gist. The staining process is pretty simple. There's not a whole lot to it.
Yeah.
As long as you remember to put those cardboard pieces or something to protect that deck when you're doing your verticals.
Absolutely.
I can't stress that enough. I again, guilty. I've had decks with those little drip marks, and it's infuriating. For 2 years, you're going out there and everybody sees those drip marks on your deck every time.
And the nice thing about the water-based stains is when it looks dry, it's dry. You can put your furniture right back on the deck. You can readdress your flower pots. It's not going to leave any water rings from your furniture or your water pot or your flower pots. And it just is much quicker because now your deck's set back up. You can have, you know, a birthday party the next day.
So the next morning, I can sit down on my deck and have a high-powered Kool-Aid.
Absolutely.
Okay, Chester, we have got our stain down, and we've been enjoying our deck for a little while now, and it's probably time for us to start thinking about a maintenance coat, but I need to know when the right time is to do a maintenance coat on our deck.
The maintenance coat on your deck, the time to apply it can vary, but the best way to tell is when it stops repelling water. When water looks like it's soaking into the deck, it's time to give a maintenance coat. So at first sign of aging, you want to do a maintenance coat. And this can be done 3 to 5 times. The length of time you get out of your maintenance coat is going to depend on the weather conditions that you're dealing with, how much UV rays it has. One thing of note is that this product also has a zinc additive that helps actually repel the UV rays, which is the most damaging thing that a deck can have as far as pulling the color back out of it. When a deck gets wet and the UV rays evaporate the water off, it does pull a minute amount of the stain out. So over a period of time, you're going to need to reapply the stain.
So it's kind of like a sunscreen for
absolutely,
your deck.
it's like a sunscreen for your deck. The zinc, the encapsulated zinc that they put into this stain is just like the stuff you put on your nose in the summertime to keep you from getting a sunburn. So basically, it stops your deck from getting sun bleached out.
So the bottom line of that, Chester, from what I'm gathering from you, is there's no way to set your watch for a maintenance coat.
No, not really. It varies from application to application, the direction of the deck facing the sun, the weathering it gets, whether you've had a harsh winter or a light winter. But the best rule of thumb is when it looks like it's aging or it's not repelling water, it's time to apply a new coat.
So the only thing that can tell you when it's ready for a new coat is the deck itself.
The deck itself, absolutely. And when you do reapply a maintenance coat, it is one coat only. You do not need to apply a second coat. There's no 15-minute delay time. Just get right after it and stain the whole deck, and you're done.
Yeah, it doesn't sound to me like the maintenance coat really even has to be as thick if you're doing a coat.
Oh, not at all, and you won't need as much stain either.
So when we're going to go out there and do that maintenance coat, Chad, what kind of prep? Do we need to use the cleaning solution and the brightener and all that stuff again?
No, not at all. The nice thing about the water-based product is it'll clean right up with a standard household dish detergent. Dawn dish detergent has a wonderful product. But it's a wonderful product to use, and it'll clean your deck sufficiently. And then you just hose it off, allow it to dry a little bit, make sure it's dry to the touch, and apply your maintenance coat.
Okay. We're going to start wrapping this up then, Chet, but I do want to touch on price points. What's your price point on a gallon semi-transparent?
Semi-transparent is $49.99, I believe, right now.
Okay. There's an elephant in the room all of a sudden. Let's talk about the difference. Thompson's, you're looking at about $27-30 a gallon.
Right, it's half the cost, but you're going to reapply it twice as often. So the overall cost is probably even more because it's not going to last near as long, and there's a lot more prep involved with those products because each time you restain your deck with one of those products, you should go through these 2 or 3
Yeah, you got to strip it down. It's an oil base. We talked about that.
Yep.
You have to strip oil base down. There's
Absolutely.
no maintenance coats on that.
Much more time involved in cleaning and reapplying those stains.
Time, and honestly, you'll spend more money long term when you're using a product. More than twice as much, I can guarantee you that. And look, I'm not here to dog out Thompson's. I grew up every summer out there. My dad had me out there putting Thompson's on there. It was a fantastic product back then. But unfortunately, the evolution of deck stains, so many things have happened since Thompson's original formula came out. Zinc nanoparticles are one of those things. Those didn't exist a while. It's evolved so much. There's so much better product out there right now.
Absolutely.
You know, and if you're married to Thompson's, hey, that's fine. My dad would still be putting Thompson's on if he was still alive because that was his brand and that's what he wanted.
Yeah, mine as well.
But the Thompson's is disappearing from shelves, so you want to start looking at making a jump into another product for the longevity of your deck.
Absolutely.
And there's no better one than another family-owned, locally based product. Okay, Chester, I think we're going to wrap things up. We pretty much hit on everything we want to talk about. We will be putting a lot of our links to this video as well as a printable application you can take outside and have on your deck while you're working, a step-by-step situation, and some other links on our website to some of the other videos that are out there as far as helping you understand which stains to choose. www.ormhardware.com is where you'll find a lot of that information. Chester, if they want to get a hold of you here, Chester is fantastic. I do recommend if you buy a soft brush, you come in here and test it out on his noggin to make sure that it's an appropriate brush for you. But Chester's a wealth of information. He's also conveyed all of this information to his staff out here. So anybody here can help you. What's the phone number out here if they have any questions, Chet?
Our phone number at Orm Hardware in New Concord is 740-826-4160.
Fantastic. And I think that about wraps it up. Chet, does anybody want to say hi to?
Yeah, I'd like to take a shout out to my fiance Christine Counts. Hi dear, how you doing? Be home soon. And remember, when you use defy, you're defying the elements.
You must have gotten in trouble last night if you threw a shout out to the fiance, Chester.
Yeah.
Okay, hey, thanks very much, guys. We appreciate you tuning in. Have a great day. Stop in and check us out. Remember, the Orm Hardware Company is your hardware company. Have a great day.
Thank you.